pop those drinks. It's time for Sports Around the Bar. Welcome into Sports Around the Bar, your weekly sports talk show. As always, I am Jakey Bartender, and I am joined on center stool by the great and powerful Drew. We got a lot to talk about, man. The Jets always seem to find a way to shoot themselves in the foot. We'll discuss whether or not this next firing of their GM is that next kind of step in the perennial self-sabotage of the New York Jets. And then we're going to move on and talk about the NBA and the draft order and what all that means and the Pelicans taking over and everything else. A lot to talk about with that. Obviously, that draft order, whether you think it's rigged, whether you don't. I mean, there's a lot to talk about, Drew, with the aftermath.
There is. Steve, what's going on, man? Rest in peace, Pacho. Hey, guess what, man? There's a spot for you in that stadium right there, dude. You can take over, get the luchador and the hat and all that stuff. Man, that's you next. You're the next Pacho, man. I can believe in you, Steve.
Drew is moving on quick. Wow, the guy's not even in the ground yet, and you're already giving away his seat. It's terrible, man.
Well,
terrible.
I think someone should take it over, and I think Steve's a perfect option.
Yes, well, obviously, the Buffalo Bills have lost a good one as well. I know we talked about it a little bit on a post. Good to see you, Brian. But I don't know how much time we're going to have devote to that, is what I was trying to say. We got to talk Jets. We're going to talk about their division rival a little bit more today. And obviously, if you haven't heard, they fired their GM, Mike McCagnon, and have appointed Adam Gase, formerly in charge of personnel for Miami, now to be in charge of personnel of the New York Jets. Drew, first impressions. Before we go into anything deeper, what are your first impressions about this move and giving the reins over to a guy like Adam Gase, because supposedly the two were fighting?
Literally, I mean, okay, besides some defensive players.
That was me, Kevin. Good to see you, man. Sorry.
No, you're good. Literally, defensive players in the last couple of drafts that he was part of in Miami, he did decent on. But I will not sit there and say that his draft down in Miami gives him any kind of credentials that goes, man, you want this guy leading the team in drafts and signing free agents. I mean, no one wanted to come to Miami. His drafts were literally...
Danny Amendola did.
Overpaid. And, I mean, literally... I don't want to sit there and knock some of the defensive players. You look at Xavier Howard. You look at there's another one I'm blanking out. Adams, yeah. No,
that's for the Jets. I'm sorry. I'm still stuck on the Jets.
They're Minkah Fitzpatrick.
Right.
So, besides that, I don't know why you want Adam Gase to run it. If there's something going on with the GM and the leadership of that, I get it. You need to move him on, even though I think he's done a really great job for the organization so far. When you compare the last couple of drafts compared to Miami and the Jets, you got to give to the Jets over Miami.
And they went 10-6 his first year there with Todd Bowles at head coach. Obviously, things have not worked out quite so well since then. But the most confusing thing to me here, Drew, and we'll talk about the personnel and everything here in just a second. The most confusing thing here for me is, why did you let this guy give away $125 million in guaranteed money to all these players on your team and then go draft for you if you're just going to fire him right afterward? That makes absolutely no sense. If you don't believe in him, there should have been somebody else sitting in that chair before the offseason started. Supposedly, this is all because him and Adam Gase could not get along, which is weird because he's the guy who said he wanted Adam Gase and hired Adam Gase. Supposedly, it's because they weren't getting along. It seems like Adam Gase thought that some guys like Le'Veon Bell coming in were going to be overpaid. That's where they were kind of butting heads, but that's all water under the bridge. I mean, you made the point before the show. They still have $28 million in cap space left. You can afford to overpay people right now when you're just totally bereft of talent, right?
Absolutely, and $28 million, which is going to go up next year because cap goes up, every year. You have tons of space there to sit there and pick up wide receivers if someone comes out on the market, an offensive lineman if you feel like you need to trade one or sign one. I mean, because looking at the contracts, a lot of you guys are still under contract in the Jets organization. I mean, we're going through the contracts. Right. There wasn't a whole lot out there, maybe besides Darren Lee talking about taking up his fifth option. You don't really have a lot of people you got to pay. So you're looking at $28 million? Shoot, you go pick up a good wide receiver with that.
I totally agree, man. And maybe Adam Gase was sitting there saying, hey, after this draft, you didn't do enough to bring in offensive players. He's an offensive guy. That's the first thing he's going to be judged on critically, right? If you're calling the offense and it's not working, everyone's going to be sitting there saying, what's wrong with Adam Gase? And I know we're going to be saying, well, look at his receivers, but we've been saying that about the Jets, and they've not addressed that. So maybe that's where part of the contention comes in.
Well, you sit there and look at Miami in the last couple of drafts that Adam Gase did. He barely drafted any offense. I think the tight end from last year, Gesicki, there you go. It was the only draft pick that I saw that was randomly might be decent. I mean, it's too young.
So Kalen Ballage, a good running back out of Alabama that might develop in it. It was a 4th round pick. Look, I'm with you. They didn't really invest a lot in offense or their weapons in Miami. but he still kind of got hung out to dry a little bit when the offense wasn't clicking. So maybe he's sitting there learning from his mistakes, and Adam Gase is saying, I'm not going to take the fall again because the offense isn't working when we haven't addressed enough on the offensive side of the ball. That being said, $13 million for a guy like Le'Veon Bell, when your team has the money to spend, I think that's still a pretty good contract. I know there's opportunity cost of, well, we could have given those to other players down the line in the future and maybe brought in a couple receivers for that money. Or we could have brought in 2 or 3 different weapons and brought in other guys. But let's face it, man, New York right now is not a destination. When you look at the Jets and the way they've played for the past few years, you can't sit there and tell me you're luring a bunch of big free agents unless you overpay for them, unless you offer a financial incentive to come play for an organization that still has Tom Brady in division, has the Buffalo Bills that look like they're going to be formidable. Except for Miami, you're looking like the 3rd team in the division, right?
No, it definitely looks like that. But let's just go ahead and talk about some of the signs he had, because what is the Jets' offense without Le'Veon Bell? I'm not saying Le'Veon Bell is worth $13 million. I'm not saying he's worth all the money they gave him. But where does it put him in their rankings? I mean, I would not consider the Jets good at all on offense if they didn't have Le'Veon Bell. I think with Le'Veon Bell, you're looking, in my opinion, is anywhere from 3 to 4 extra wins with Le'Veon Bell there. I mean, I could be wrong, but you've seen the guy in the past in the Steelers organization take over a game offensively. Why can't he do it again? He just had a year off. He's got fresh legs.
No, I totally agree. I mean, you're getting him there. He's obviously been incredibly successful in Pittsburgh. He catches the ball well, so he'll be a safety valve for a young quarterback. There's no reason to not want him in New York. I mean, you look at everybody else, you're going to say, who are we beating teams with? Le'Veon Bell is one of those guys who can beat teams.
Yeah.
Is Quincy Enunwa, a guy who's struggled to stay healthy, going to be beating teams? Or their free agent signing Jamison Crowder, is he beating teams by himself? No. I mean, we've already said it. You need to put weapons around Sam Darnold if you expect him to succeed. This is a weapon. It's legitimately a weapon. Even if he is a running back, he can catch the ball incredibly well, and it's in the plus column for sure. It doesn't matter what you spend at that point. You need weapons before you need just extra cap space laying around, right?
Right. Steve says the Jets' offense is 23rd without Bell. I actually think that's kind of high, man.
I do too.
I would probably say like 28.
I mean, they have an offensive line. I think they can run the ball. They got a little bit out of their backs last year in Crowell, especially early in the season when Crowell was still kind of fresh.
Still healthy,
and yeah, exactly. I mean, they got. I'm drawing a blank on their backup. Not Elijah McGuire, the other Bly Powell. They got some work out of their running back. So
I mean, they did, but
now this is a major upgrade. Nobody can sit there and tell me that they were even in the ballpark beforehand.
Chris says Bell has a lot to prove here, and Brian says Bell will definitely get them 4 to 5 wins. So Brian's on the same board as I am. Chris just saying he has a lot to prove.
But that's good. As an owner, I want a guy who has something to prove because he's going to be playing hard.
He's got the only thing I think he has to prove is that he's worth that money. I think that's the only thing he has to prove, because no one's going to sit there and say that Bell's not a good back. No one's going to sit there and say Bell doesn't deserve to be the highest or one of the highest paid running backs in the league. No one can say that. He's been that guy. He's always been in fantasy leagues. He's always been that 1 or 2 guy that everyone sits at the top there. There's always been another name, but Bell's always been the most consistent name sitting up there.
Absolutely. And if he's anything like he was in Pittsburgh, they're going to have some success in New York. And you need a guy like that that's going to be able to dominate on the ground when you're playing tough defenses like Buffalo, teams like New England that seem to be able to focus in on your key piece and try to take him away. Le'Veon Bell has kind of been a bit of a kryptonite for the Patriots in the past, and I get it. You're looking at a much better offense out of the Steelers than the Jets have currently, but This is how you build a team. Even if it's not this year, you can bring in receivers next year, and all of a sudden you go from being nobody to actually being somewhat formidable in the NFL.
Right, and I don't want to get a stint off of Le'Veon Bell. We've talked about him plenty during this offseason.
Yeah.
But the point is that Mike, I keep on forgetting his last name. McCagnon is literally done the right moves, in my opinion. Maybe he's overpaid, but guess what? You just said it. New York Jets is not a destination for a lot of these players. No one wants to go play there.
I mean, absolutely. You can't sit there and tell me that the Jets are high on anyone's list and that they have a chance to win the Super Bowl, or they've even been a well-run organization for the past 30 years. So you have to overpay. You have to give some kind of incentive to these guys like C.J. Mosley, which I think was a pretty good addition. Again, I'm not in love with the numbers, but when you've got the money, you open the wallet and you pay somebody. So you bring in all these other guys, and that's how the team eventually gets better. You hit a couple of draft picks, and then all of a sudden people want to come there because you're winning games.
Right. Now looking at the contracts and going through that was a little confusing to us, because out of their top 15 signings of their contracts, 3 of them are inside linebackers with Darren Darren Lee, Williamson, and now C.J. Mosley. Yeah, as far as I know, you don't play three inside linebackers.
Maybe they're planning on shifting to a 4-3 and they're just going to line them all up next to each other. No, I mean, I think they need to employ a rotation. I think everybody knows Avery Williamson is not guarding anybody in the passing game. He's one of the biggest liabilities at middle linebacker in the passing game in the NFL. So I don't necessarily have a problem with having three talented linebackers when one is so one-dimensional that, I mean, if it's third down, you do not want him in on the field unless it's like third and inches, and they might run the ball.
And that's what they drafted Darren Lee to be, was that cover kind of running linebacker. And, you know, who knows yet if he's really panned out. He's going into year 4, but there's no doubt about it. C.J. Mosley can do almost anything on the field. He is a three down back.
Absolutely.
At all times.
Now let's go to the comments really quick. Steve says they landed C.J. Mosley. The GM knew what he was doing. I kind of agree with you there. I mean, up to this point, I've sat there and said their offense has been lackluster. They haven't done enough to address anything. They believe in Quincy Enunwa. I think he's a third wide receiver. But again, you could sit there and argue at the very least they're investing in guys that they believe in. So, yeah, sure, they haven't done enough on the weapons. But everything else, you look at the offensive line, that looks like a unit that could be pretty good. You look at the defense, I mean, we were surprised last year when they fell off. We had them winning 8 games, I think, or 7 games in the preseason rankings before
something like that.
Before the defense fell apart. If this defense can go back, they have Pro Bowlers on it. I mean, they have Jamal Adams playing safety, who's absolutely fantastic. They have a guy who can play like it in Tremaine Johnson, the cornerback.
They also have Marcus May, who got hurt last year and was a big loss to their defense. But
exactly.
He's come back.
Now they have Quinnen Williams. They have C.J. Mosley. Things are looking up for this Jets defense,
no doubt
too.
About it.
And then you go and fire them because the guys aren't getting along. This is what sets teams back when you lose your consistency. Look at all the good teams in the NFL. When you're starting to hit on things, you stay consistent. You don't fire coaches. I don't think there's any reason to move on from McCagnon. This, to me, huge mistake.
Well, you just said don't fire coaches. To be honest, I would have kept the GM, and I think Adam Gase is on the hot seat because he's supposed to be this quarterback whisperer.
Well, we're not Arizona.
He's supposed to be the guy that
give the guy more than 30 days in the building before you move him out.
No, I'm not saying fire him. What I'm saying is I think he's just the guy in the hot seat because you're talking about your future and Sam Darnold. You're talking about a guy that you took highly last year thinking he is the future of your organization, and you bring in a coach like Adam Gase who is considered, like I said, a quarterback guru coach. He got the best out of Jay Cutler. He supposedly got the best out of Ryan Tannehill. Well, let's see what he can do with Sam Darnold, because as much as you can sit there and knock all his wide receiver options of not being great, well, guess what? Great quarterbacks turn their wide receiver to a better player.
Right.
They step them up. I mean, let's just be completely honest. Look at the Patriots and what Tom Brady has done. Every one of those wide receivers that have left the organization have declined because they're not getting a Hall of Famer or a great quarterback throwing in the ball. Not that I think Adam Gase is going to be on the hot seat, but I think if one of them was going to be, that would be my pick.
Now, Chris also says Bell is going to have a huge workload, and it's going to get heavy because, honestly, they don't really have a QB or receivers to help Bell. Look, I agree with you on the wide receiving group. They need to get a lot better at pass catcher, whether it's tight ends, whether it's wide receivers. They need guys who are going to be able to catch the ball. As for quarterback, I don't think we really know what Sam Darnold is. I mean, yeah, he kind of struggled last year, but you look at everyone around him and you can sit there and say, who would have success in that system? Yeah. Short of you having an Aaron Rodgers or a guy that elevates people like that, nobody's really succeeding with last year's Jets. So, again, I don't think they know what they have, and the best way to find out is to put some guys that can actually do things at wide receiver and let him work with those guys. But we haven't really seen that happen yet. Yeah. All right, let's move forward, Drew. Last thoughts on this before we move on. Is there anything the Jets can do right now that kind of mitigate the situation? Is there a hire out there that they can bring somebody in that you're like, okay, well, I get it, we shouldn't have made that move, but maybe we upgraded or maybe something else happened?
No.
Just anything not make this a disaster.
I'm completely with Steve when he says this is a power-hungry move by Gase. I think he will be the GM. I think he'll take over all personnel operations just like he did down in Miami. I think this is just him moving, trying to get to that ownership year, saying, hey, I could do this without him.
And they had a 9-7 year in there, Miami. I think they made the playoffs that year. They might have, or if not, they got close. And then they were 7-9 last year in a year where everybody had them written off because their talent wasn't there. So maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, right? And we still are. But maybe that's not the worst thing in the world to have Adam Gase running everything. I just think it's a bit of a risk, especially for a guy that has won you 10 games, and McCagnon has done some good things to set this roster up. Maybe not enough, but he's done some good things. And you do it after you let the guy spend your bankroll, basically. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but hey, when did the Jets ever make a lot of sense to me? I don't know.
The 70s?
It's been a while. I wasn't there for that. Let's talk NBA next, Drew. Let's talk about the draft order from last night. Obviously, if you haven't heard, the New Orleans Pelicans won the lottery, both figuratively and metaphorically, and now we're going to presumably draft Zion Williamson here, Drew. In a 3-player draft, or what most people consider a 3-player draft, with Ja Morant, R.J. Barrett, and Zion Williamson all at the top. I know Cam Reddish, I had him as a top 5 guy, but he's kind of fallen off here. I think the Pelicans are now in the perfect situation. I mean, you want to talk about turning a roster back around and recovering from Anthony Davis saying he wants to move on? This is how you do it, right? You get a guy like Zion, and then maybe you go trade Anthony Davis, or you try to keep him?
I mean, it definitely will help their roster out. Can you sit there and say it's a turnaround, though?
It's a turnaround.
Can you sit there and say if you lose Anthony Davis and you bring in Zion Williamson that there is no misstep at all?
Well, the question is, what do you give up for Anthony Davis? Because they are going to trade him. There are going to be assets that come in when he leaves.
Right, but I'm just asking. If it was just a straight-up trade, I know it can happen. Let's just say Anthony Davis leaves, Zion Williams
comes in. Is any rookie worth someone that's been in the league 5 years in the NBA?
He's literally proven, and a lot of times could be considered an MVP caliber guy. I mean, no, that's what I'm saying. Losing Anthony Davis, regardless if you bring in Zion Williamson, you're going to take a step back.
Now, Chris has a pretty hot take here. He says the Pelicans won't take Zion at all. They go Morant instead. I mean, they already have Drew Holiday. Do you move him to the 2 and let Morant play point guard? Or do you go for R.J. Barrett instead? I think if you don't take Zion Williamson here, you trade that pick to any one of the teams that would love to have him. There's no excuse to not take him, or at the very least trade him for a haul of draft picks for great players, and then maybe you convince Anthony Davis to stay from there. Look, you can't sit there and tell me you're not going to either take this guy or trade him. There's no in between. You can't draft somebody else with the number 1 pick, right?
No,
you're stuck. I know we kind of argued about this beforehand, but if you're the Pelicans, you have to do this.
Now, Brian does have an opinion here that definitely makes sense. He says, unless Zion decides to go back to college because he has not hired an agent. Right. As Sharif has told us, no, he let us know through our community page. We appreciate that, Sharif, even though you're not on right now. He hasn't hired an agent. So, that being said, he doesn't have to. Even though he quote-unquote declared, he can undeclare for the draft. He can go back to Duke.
Up to 10 days before it, yes. He can go return to Duke because he hasn't signed a shoe deal. He hasn't signed an agent. The question is, will that happen, and what does that set for you going forward? Do you think that kind of turns teams off, that, hey, I may have the first overall pick, but this guy may duck out on me again? Or is he maybe not as invested or maybe not as big of a team guy as I'd like to have? Or does it not matter? Because it is the NBA, right? I mean, the NBA seems to be more star-heavy than any other sport in the world at this point, where if the star wants something, you just give it to him and you hope he stays happy.
No, that's true. Let's just go back to this, what Chris said.
That's real quick. That is a fair point, Brian. He could play for the U.S. men's national team and not go back to Duke. That is something he could do. Should he do it? No. Go take the money. But
Chris, let's just go back to your statement where you said the Pelicans won't take Zion. Dude, they're going to be taking him. The only thing I could think of, which could happen, I mean, it'd be crazy, is like the Pelicans trade LeBron James, or the Lakers to bring in LeBron James. I mean, that could be a possible trade.
Would you trade for a 35-year-old LeBron? Would you give up Zion Williamson in this draft? And I want to talk about Zion being a little bit overrated here. But
well, I guess my point is it has to be that kind of caliber player to take the number 1 pick away from the Pelicans.
I think you missaid Kevin Durant. If they could trade him for Kevin Durant or get him in some kind of long-term deal.
Kevin Durant's going to be out of contract.
Exactly, which is why that won't happen.
LeBron James is under contract with a no-trade policy.
And LeBron James is 35.
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
You're talking about getting a guy that your team totally legitimately becomes a legitimate contender right off the bat.
Do they? Tell that to the Lakers. I mean, that's what they thought they were getting in LeBron, and I know you're going to sit there and say he was hurt. Yes, he was hurt.
No, I'm not even going to say that. The Lakers don't have anyone like Anthony Davis.
Well, Anthony Davis may not stick around, as you've heard. I mean,
what if you sit there and tell Anthony Davis, hey, let's
talk about that.
I'm going to trade my number 1 pick, and we're going to go out and get LeBron James for you. Will you stay?
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what should the Pelicans do. First off, if that's me, I'm still probably saying no. Because do you want to, number 1, stay in New Orleans after you built up all this bad will and everything else by sitting there saying, I'm leaving, you have to trade me, there's no way I'm going to play for this organization anymore. And number 2, do you want to get bossed around by LeBron? Because, let's face it, everywhere LeBron goes, he wants to play GM and everything else. If you're Anthony Davis, are you going to renew your contract there in New Orleans with a guy like LeBron that's going to be sucking all the air out of the room? I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to play number 2 when I'm that good. At the very least, I want someone at my same level that we can go win a championship with. I don't want somebody that's 35, starting to fall off, starting to get hurt, telling me what to do, and telling my GM that he needs to trade all my players away and everything like that. I don't want to be around a guy that's going to take all the power out of the room.
Rick's got a comment here. He says Zion will be a bust.
Well, I'm conflicted. I want to talk about 8 different things right now, but let's start with this. Even if he is, I do remember a time where we were talking about Ben Simmons this very same way, right? Yeah. Everyone in college was sitting there saying, Ben Simmons, man, he's a physical freak. We've never seen an athlete like this. When he gets to the NBA, he's going to take it over. This is LeBron, come again, and he's just going to run everything for the next 15 years. Let's fast forward here 2 or 3 years later, Drew. What do we think about Ben Simmons now? The fact of the matter is, we just never know in the NBA. You don't know when they come from college and get to play with the big boys if anyone is going to develop well enough to be that good. Do we think Zion's going to be really good? Yeah, we think he's going to be good. Do we think Zion's going to be the next LeBron James? I think he's falling short of that. I really do. He's not going to be the guy that I hear transcendent talent all the time. It's not going to be overnight. He's not going to come in like LeBron and take a team like the Cavs that had no talent on them to the playoffs in year 1 just because he's there.
Talking about Ben Simmons, he's one of those players that should have stayed in college. You know, he played his freshman year and then he left right off the bat out of KU. To be honest, he should have stayed there, played another 1 or 2 more years, develop his game, because I think that the possibility of his talent could have been there, but there's no doubt about it. When he jumped in the NBA, it all fell off. I mean, let's not say I'm not saying he's a terrible player. We kind of sat there and debated for a little bit. He might be anywhere from 60 to 80 of one of the best players in that kind of ranking, but nothing clearer than what they said he was going to be coming out of college. This guy lost all development. His jump shot is completely garbage. It seems like he's completely off.
He's one-dimensional. He drives in and he scores, and he does that well, but when you know that, you can take that away.
And when you sit there and talk about Zion Williams being the next LeBron James, let's just be completely honest. No one should ever have that put over their head. I don't care what this kid is. He is a kid. He should never hear the word "I'm compared to LeBron James." That is so unfair.
And it was unfair to LeBron, right? We did the same thing to LeBron coming in. They're like, it's Michael Jordan. This guy's better than Michael Jordan. They even call him King James coming out of college.
Is Blake Griffin. That's who I see this guy being. I see him being a Blake Griffin, possibly
the good Blake Griffin, right?
Right, yeah. Possibly a little bit more physical than Blake is, even though that's not saying that Blake is not physical. I just think Zion could be a little bit more physical than Blake is. That being said, man, I mean, more than likely, he's going to be a great player in the NBA. Will he be a Hall of Famer? Will he be the elite caliber that everyone's making him out to be? That's yet to be untold. But to sit there and say he's going to be a bust, I just don't see it, man. I just don't see it.
I don't think he's going to be a bust either. Also, Brian says that he thought the Pelicans had a good thing going with Davis and Boogie Cousins. I did too. I thought they were playing big ball in a league where everyone was trying to play small ball. But I think Boogie Cousins, the problem is his attitude more than anything else. Again, they've made it work in Golden State, but it just seems like Golden State has that magic formula that it doesn't matter what kind of personality you have. You just find they're the Patriots of the NBA, right?
Yeah.
You just fit in.
Yeah.
It just works whenever you go up there. So again, I thought they had a good thing going too, but I don't know with those attitudes and everything that Boogie was ever a guy that. I mean, it was the same thing when he was in Sacramento. I mean,
at this point,
it was the attitude that was holding him back.
Well, he can't stay healthy now.
Right.
It doesn't matter what he wants to do. He doesn't stay healthy.
Also, going back to this, let's talk about what can the Pelicans do here, because I think the obvious move is draft Zion, right? If it's me and I'm the GM, my first thing is I'm calling Anthony Davis like, okay, how do we work this out, right? There has to be something. You want to win championships. We just drafted Zion. He's going to be the 3rd or 4th person in this team, and I'm going to show you how. We're going to actually make a move and probably get rid of Solomon Hill, probably get rid of Etwan Moore to free up as much cap space as we can. We take that on top of everything else we have for cap space, which is going to be about $16 million over the absolute top end number for the NBA. I would take all that and I'd go pay Klay Thompson. I would get Klay Thompson a max contract to bring him in as my 3rd guy. You keep Anthony Davis. You have Drew Holiday, who's also making a lot of money. You have Klay Thompson, who's going to be a great 2 catch and shoot guy to be able to play and also play defense for this team. And then you have Zion Williamson with no expectations, lots of talent around him, that when you need him, he's going to be able to go inside and drive, because Anthony Davis shoots, Drew Holiday shoots, Klay Thompson shoots. Those guys can play from the perimeter. You're going to be able to feed the ball to Zion and let him drive in. If it's me, I'm talking to Anthony Davis like, hey, go tell the media we're making up, and I need you to recruit Klay Thompson for me, because I think that is the quickest fix for this team.
Sharif, I'm glad you could join us for a short time. Jeremy, it's always good to see you, man. Man, you're saying there's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
I am. I absolutely believe if you could somehow talk Anthony Davis back from the ledge where he absolutely wants out and say, look, we know you want to win. Everybody wants to win. We want to win too. Guess what? We just got a great player out of college who's going to be able to drive in and play really good inside ball. We like Drew Holiday and what he does and his effort. We like him at the number 1 spot. Bringing Klay Thompson, who's going to be able to add range to this team and score a lot from the outside, especially when that guy gets hot. he's untouchable. He might even be better than Curry when he's on fire. I mean, this is the guy that set the record for threes in, what was it, a quarter where he hit like 13 of them or whatever it was.
Crazy.
Absolutely, you've got the best catch-and-shoot guy in the NBA, and then we've got Anthony Davis who can play inside, who can play outside. He can do whatever he needs to. You can play him at the 4, Zion at the 3. You can go Klay Thompson at the 2, Holiday at the 1, and then you bring in any kind of center that's good at rebounding. All of a sudden, you've got a team that can win a championship. You got to work on the bench a little bit. You're going to have to bring in some cheap players to come in when those guys aren't on the court, but when you have that much talent, I mean, it works for Golden State. At that point, you've got 3 to 4 guys, assuming Zion Williamson's as good as everyone thinks he can be. They're going to be able to be, guys that can take over on a night and win you a game by themselves.
I want to poke holes in your bubble.
Go ahead.
I want to do it, and Steve's kind of with me. Steve says Clay's going to go to Boston if he leaves. We'll get to that comment. To be honest with you, I think Klay Thompson he's not a very vocal guy, but I think there is going to be a decision for him to make, and if it's to go to a team like the Pelicans that has Anthony Davis that they keep and has Zion Williams, has Drew Holiday, and goes there and he goes off and wins another championship down there, does that say Klay Thompson was one of the best players ever to play the game, or does that say Klay Thompson knows where to go because his teammates help him win championships? I mean, does this guy want to look? Does he want to look better in the media's eyes as saying, "Hey, I'm one of the reasons why"?
What, Boston wouldn't be that? Like, if you run off to Boston, isn't that the ready-made team? I mean, we can admit they were a disappointment this year.
He might pick a team like the Clippers.
Like the Knicks or the Clippers. Right, absolutely. And I've heard that too. But we're going to be talking about a team going from the lottery to having the first overall pick to being a playoff contender, maybe going Western Conference Finals here, maybe even going to the finals and winning them. Yeah, I think that's a pretty good argument for it's me and I'm really good, right? It's not like Kevin Durant that's going to a team like the Warriors that had just won and then going and joining that team. This is you going to a team that had the first pick in the draft, Drew, and turning them around right away. Yes, there were players on the team, but you can't sit there and tell me that that's not building. I mean, Anthony Davis already looked like he was on his way out, and then you had, Drew Holiday? You're telling me Drew Holiday's as good as some other guys in the NBA? That's not a super team. Not yet. If you go there and it turns into one, then absolutely you can sit there and say, it's a super team because I arrived. It's almost like LeBron going to Miami, right? Miami wasn't that good beforehand. I know they'd won a championship with Wade before that, but that was a couple years removed before he went down there. It's kind of the same scenario where you show up and then this team gets successful. You can sit there and say, it's all on me.
I guess it depends on what Klay Thompson wants his legacy to be in the NBA. Sharif, we did give you a shout-out, man, about that, about your Zion not signing an agent earlier in the show, just if you want to rewatch it. But he's right. I mean, he still holds all the power to his future. Whatever he decides to do, that's up to him.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. Now let's talk just really quick here, because I know I'm rambling a little bit, Drew, but I want to talk about what happens if Anthony Davis says, no, I won't come back. What do you do then? You have 2 trade options here, right? I held up 3. You have 2 trade options in this scenario, right? I mean, you could trade him to Memphis, but somehow I don't think Memphis is like, we'll convince him to stay in Memphis, right? I don't think anyone's sitting there saying they're going to give up the number 2 pick for Anthony Davis, because even with Anthony Davis, you're not winning any championships. He's going to move on at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And then you've got nothing. So they're taking John Morant at number 2. I think that's I'm not going to say set in stone, but that's pretty close to set in stone. So who do you trade with? You have the Knicks and the Lakers.
I mean, I've already told you what I thought, and you told me I was crazy.
Well, I don't think you're crazy. I don't know. I mean, it could absolutely happen that way. Nobody knows what these guys are thinking.
Brian says Anthony Davis still wants to be traded. I don't know if he's gone out officially said he still wants to be traded. I know he said he's going to wants to be traded, but I don't think there's been any word since the lottery draft that he said, I still want to be traded. I know there's a lot of talk about it, but he has not made official statements saying that. I'm sure that gives him a little bit of, I'll rethink my idea.
Wouldn't you? If it's me, I'm sitting there saying, I mean, I know Zion's good, right?
Right.
We all have seen what he's done at Duke. I know this guy can be good. Is it going to be good enough for me to win a championship? Because I think that's what he cares about. And props to him for that. The fact of the matter is, I think if you just draft Zion and you have Drew Holiday and Anthony Davis, you're probably not going to be good enough. So my whole point, if I'm Anthony Davis, is you land a free agent or you trade me. And it's that simple. I'll give you to the end of the offseason. You land one of these big guys. If it's Kyrie Irving and you move Drew Holiday to the 2, or if it's Kevin Durant that you somehow managed to land, or it's Klay Thompson, who I think would be the best fit in this scenario. You land one of these caliber guys, and I'll stick around. If you don't, you move on, and you rebuild from there.
Steve said it could be a similar situation to Kawhi to Toronto if he might like Memphis on the way Kawhi embraces Toronto. But let's be completely honest, Toronto was a playoff team before Kawhi got there. Memphis is not a playoff team before Anthony Davis got there, if that's where he went.
I don't know, Drew. I mean, I'm not 100% sure.
And just because we're from Nashville, we see a lot of this stuff. The Memphis and the fans around the Grizzlies, man, they absolutely embrace that team. They love that team. The fan base is huge down there. There's no doubt if any player goes down that they'll embrace him.
Also, Joseph says, would we be shocked if the Pelicans draft Morant instead of Zion? Yes, 100%. The fact of the matter is, I just said it, you cannot not draft Zion here. If you're going to do that and you want a different player, trade the Grizzlies, because I guarantee you they'll probably go draft Zion Williamson with that first pick. Trade them, get more value, and then draft Morant. I don't think they do it. Not at number one. There's no way it can happen. Especially
about
with
a
Drew
GM
Holiday
losing his job.
Yeah, especially with Drew Holiday there. I really do believe they already have their number one who they want. They want the ball in Drew Holiday's hands. They want him to distribute. I think Morant, as good as he is at scoring, as good as he is at doing everything else, he's an assist guy too. And now you've got two assist guys at the point and shooting guard. I don't think they necessarily have the shooter they want at that number 2 spot. So I don't know if he necessarily fits as well as a guy like Zion, who you bring him in, let him drive to the basket. If, again, you keep Anthony Davis, who can play inside and outside, you've got a heck of a team.
Yeah, you would. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's definitely going to be crazy. The draft, the lottery of the draft picks has definitely kind of surprised a lot of people, which I think is one of our last things we want to talk about this whole thing. Does anybody here in the comments, including us, do we think that this is rigged? Because let's say here, if Anthony Davis leaves the organization and they don't get the first pick, they don't bring in Zion.
They had 6% chance here, Drew. What if they get the 6th pick?
Who thinks that this organization would be legitimate for any kind of years in the future? I mean,
no. I mean, it would absolutely be a sinking ship. And I know everyone's sitting there saying if it was rigged, it would have went to the Knicks. I understand that, but I think if you look at it, that's the obvious play, right? If you're rigging it, you don't want to make it look like it's rigged. So you give it to the team that's falling apart, like the Pelicans. I don't know. I do believe there's a little bit of
thanks, Dad.
What's best for the NBA. I absolutely believe that, and I believe that's what we got out of this. I think they said it's best for the Pelicans to remain, at least somewhat viable, especially if they keep Anthony Davis because of this. How best do we do that? You give him the number 1 pick. You give him the best player in college basketball.
Steve completely agrees with you. He says it's rigged. Chris says, think that they need to completely revamp the drafting system. I like the lottery of it. I think it's kind of a unique way to look at it.
And they did that this year. They lowered the percentages for these teams that were tanking to keep them from giving up within like 3 weeks of the season.
It used to be like 25, 33%,
exactly.
And they always knew who would be taken.
Exactly. And now all of a sudden it's 14 for the lowest team. So yeah, absolutely. They've been playing with it. They want to find the right balance for it. I like this better a little bit, but on the other hand, it also makes it easier to rig because all of a sudden, if everyone's got a closer chance of getting this, it's not as big of a shock to see some of these other teams get the first overall pick.
Does it really surprise you that New Orleans is a market that they don't want to lose in the NBA? I mean, does it sit there and say, hey, it's worth rigging to get them another superstar?
I understand the thought process of you want it to be a big market. They would have loved this to be, quote unquote, LA or someone else like the Knicks to win this, or even Boston, with that 1% chance they had or whatever it was.
Cursed franchises ever.
But I think on the other hand, they were looking at it and said, okay, what's believable? So I don't know. Do I believe it's rigged? I believe it's influenced.
Steve says the lottery needs to go. He says make exactly like the NFL.
I think what they're worried about is with this being that long of a season and there being such a talent disparity in the NBA is teams are going to give up from the get-go. It's going to be a race to the bottom instead of a race to the top. And unless you made this like soccer where they have relegation, where everyone's desperately fighting to stay out of the last couple spots, there's really no way you could sit there and have these franchises sit there and say, we're not winning a championship this year. Let's go get the first pick, boys, and not try to win a single game all season.
I mean, it would definitely happen, especially when someone's like LeBron or Zion Williams. I mean, it would definitely make it where the team is going to pretty much suck for the whole year to get the best player.
It's the suck for luck draft strategy, right? Except you don't have 16 games to sit through. You have 82. And if you're Philadelphia, I mean, how many years did they do that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Joseph said, should the Knicks look to trade the number 3 pick?
For what? For Anthony Davis? Yeah, I mean, that was going to be my point. If Anthony Davis says no, even with Zion Williamson, I'm moving on, I for sure would offer the number 3 pick because, yeah, R.J. Barrett's a good player, but do you think R.J. Barrett's going to develop into an Anthony Davis-level talent where he's one of the maybe 10 or 5 best players in the entire NBA? I say probably not. I mean, I think he's going to be a great player. He's going to be a very good player, but do I see him being that guy? No. So if you can give up the pick number 3 and maybe a couple players or a couple picks down the line, would I do that? In a heartbeat. These picks aren't guaranteed, Drew. I'd give up I'd give up 2 firsts and a couple players or a couple pieces to go bring AD in.
I still think you're looking at the pot at the end of the rainbow. If they can't get someone like that, they're looking at just other future draft picks or just not the elite all-star, just an all-star pick. No, I think that they should stick with their pick and start building to the draft. I think the New York Knicks have struggled enough. It's time to start being smart. And as much as Anthony Davis would be awesome, I think that's a...
You lost him when you said it's time to start being smart. They're off of it's Drew's plan to rebuild the Knicks.
It's not my plan. I just think that cursed organization needs to figure out what the heck they're doing.
Absolutely. Let's finally talk about this. LA seems to be the other kind of potential landing spot for Anthony Davis. Obviously, we had all the rumors during the regular season. With them having the 4th overall pick, Drew, do they have a better chance of landing him now? I mean, obviously, it's better than everyone thought that LA would have with their, 2% chance of getting the first pick in the draft this year. How do you feel about that? Do you think at 4, they have a better chance of packaging that pick with some of these young players and bringing in a guy like AD?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. I think it can go either way. Like I said earlier, I think it may be LeBron to the Pelicans or AD to the Lakers. Either way, I think it'd be great for both organizations. I really honestly do. I know that sounds funky about saying that about the Lakers, but I think both these teams could use a revamp. I don't think either of them are on the right course to sit there and say that they're contenders next year. Unless they both have LeBron James and Anthony Davis on it. I think
if you went with my plan, I think they'd be a contender.
I'm not a full believer that Anthony Davis and Zion Williams can make you a competitor in the West. I don't believe that. It would have to add someone in like Klay Thompson that would help.
You'd be a playoff team, but are you beating the Warriors? Are you beating Houston?
Yeah.
And that's the question. Yeah. I agree with you there. I totally do. I think you could be the 4th best team. You could be the 3rd best team. You could be Portland right now, where you have C.J. McCollum, you have Damian Lillard, who are both very good players as well, but do 2 good players beat a team like Golden State? Probably not. And
no.
Let's face it, there's the off chance that KD and Klay Thompson find a way to stay in Golden State and keep the band together, and then all of a sudden you have to beat this super team. If you're going to give up all these young players, everything you've drafted is the Lakers, do 2 guys in Anthony Davis and LeBron James who may not even get along. We don't know. We've never seen them play together. Does that absolutely guarantee you a chance to beat the Warriors or at least make you somewhat even of a match for them? I'd say probably not as well. You need more than that.
Yeah, I think so too. Real quick,
Go ahead.
Comments through this about football, though. Steve says, thoughts on Buffalo possibly giving away replica poncho mask at the home opener. He says that's a classy move.
I think they should. I don't see any reason not to. There's no reason to not celebrate your fans. There's the reason you do everything you do, and they're the reason you get to do everything you do. So I think that would be a classy move by Buffalo to sit there and kind of, tip the hat to one of their late great fans in Poncho Billup.
Yeah.
Finally, Drew, I want to hit on this point before we close out the show. Anthony Davis to the Lakers with this 4th overall pick. I let you answer it. I want to answer it too. If I'm the Pelicans, I'm not even considering it. This is a 3-player draft. Why would you trade for the 4th pick? Short of some kind of surprise happening and we see someone like Barrett or Morant fall to that pick number 4, which you can't guarantee unless it's on draft night and, it happens to be pick number 4 on the clock. There's no way I would trade the 4th overall pick in this draft for somebody like Anthony Davis, regardless of what they sent me from the Lakers. So I think this pick's almost out. Even though I said it's at a better spot than it was beforehand, it's much more valuable now than it was going into the draft where we thought this was going to be pick 11, 12, 13. I really don't think that it's still enough to sit there and guarantee like a guy like Anthony Davis when the Knicks still have the 3rd pick there. You could probably go trade for a couple future picks as well. Maybe you could get 3 or 4 first-round picks out of this. So if I'm the Pelicans, I'm much more interested in trading with the Knicks than I am with the Lakers still.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. If it was going to happen, I think it would be best. It would be best for both organizations. That's what.
Right, I understand. All right, man. We've got some special thanks of our own here. Like the Bills, we do this because of our fans, and we like to keep you guys involved. We thank you so much for all the comments, man. It was a fun show.
Absolutely. Real last quick one. Steve says the Pelicans should not consider this move. Better chance of getting traded to New York for the 3rd pick, man. I think we're both in agreement with that. But real quick, guys, thank you so much for all the comments, all the love, the shares, the likes that you guys give us. We appreciate every bit of it. I just want to give special thanks to everyone that gave a comment today. Steve, Brian, Kevin, Chris, Nathan, Rick, Jeremy, Sharif, Joseph, and my dad, Ken. I appreciate it so much, guys. Thank you.
Absolutely, guys. Fun show. Obviously, it's going to be fun to watch and see what the Pelicans do with Anthony Davis because he could turn a franchise into a contender just by moving there. We're going to be back on Friday to talk more football, maybe more basketball, maybe some hockey finally. I mean, I know we promised to talk about the playoffs, but I didn't think we'd have time for it. We'll be back to talk about all of that in the future. We can't wait to talk sports with you. So for Sports Around the Bar, I'm Jakey Bartender. This is Drew, and we will see you guys on Friday.